Between 1854 and 1941, 2 million corpses rode a train that doesn't appear on any map of the London Underground. Not metaphorically, not in folklore. Actual bodies, in actual coffins, on scheduled morning departures from a station the government spent decades pretending never existed. Sir Richard Braun stood on Platform 1 of Waterloo Station on November 13, 1854, watching 48 coffins being loaded into modified luggage carriages like cargo shipments. He just solved London's death crisis with railway timetables and fare classes, first-class corpses in polished mahogany, third-class corpses in parish pine. He'd turned grief into a profit margin. The London Necropolis Railway would run for 87 years, carrying more dead than living passengers, until a single German bomb in 1941 gave the British establishment the perfect excuse to bury the evidence. What were they so desperate to hide? From Braun's 1854 prospectus, the removal of the dead from London has become not merely desirable, but absolutely necessary for the health and decency of the living. This is the story they didn't want archived. London in 1850 was suffocating under its own dead. 50,000 bodies every year crammed into 218 churchyards designed for medieval populations. St. Martin in the Fields, graves stacked 17 coffins deep. Enon Chapel in Bloomsbury, 12,000 bodies decomposing beneath the floorboards while congregants worshipped above, breathing what medical journals called cadaverous particles. The mathematics were simple and grotesque. 6 million people, 200 graveyards. Physics doesn't negotiate. The city was becoming a mass grave with streets running through it. Parliament commissioned reports with titles like Inquiry into the State of Burial Grounds in the Metropolis, bureaucratic language for admitting London was poisoning itself with corpses, cholera outbreaks traced to cemetery groundwater, property values plummeting near burial grounds. The wealthy fled to suburban estates, while the poor died surrounded by their ancestors' remains leaking into water pumps. Edwin Chadwick's 1843 report, "The emanations from dead bodies are as dangerous as those from the living sick." This wasn't just a public health crisis, it was a class crisis. How do you dispose of an empire's dead without admitting the empire itself is rotting? Enter Sir Richard Braun, not a mortician, not a priest, a businessman who looked at London's death crisis and saw infrastructure opportunity. In 1849, he purchased 2,000 acres of Surrey countryside, 25 miles southwest of the city, and announced he would build the largest cemetery in the world, with its own dedicated railway line. The pitch was elegant in its capitalism. Sell death the same way you sell commuter transport, zoned burial plots, scheduled departures, segregated by class, naturally, because even in death, Victorians couldn't bear equality. From the 1852 London Necropolis and National Mausoleum Act for the burial of the dead in a manner consistent with public health and the distinctions of society. The distinctions of society. That phrase is the entire project. Braun wasn't just building a cemetery. He was building an architecture for pretending class would survive decomposition. The necropolis would have separate entrances for Anglican, nonconformist, and Catholic dead, separate waiting rooms at the station for first, second, and third-class mourners. Your corpse would ride in a carriage matching your living income. What kind of mind designs tiered accommodations for bodies that can't feel anything? Braun's mind. The mind that understood Victorian England would pay extra for the illusion that wealth mattered to worms. November 13th, 1854, 11:40 a.m. The first London Necropolis Railway train departed Waterloo with 48 coffins and 207 mourners. The Times called it a solemn innovation. The Illustrated London News sent a sketch artist, Brown stood on the platform in a black silk top hat, watching his investment roll out on iron wheels. He'd designed everything: the modified carriages with reinforced floors for coffin weight, the separate compartments so first-class mourners wouldn't have to see third-class grief, the station itself tucked behind Waterloo's main terminus, accessible through a discreet entrance so the living commuters wouldn't be disturbed by funeral processions. A passenger account from 1855. The journey was peculiar in its quiet. No one spoke. The train moved at ceremonial speed, and through the windows, London receded as though we were leaving the world entire. They were leaving the world entire. That was the point. The necropolis offered something London's churchyards couldn't: distance, separation, the ability to bury your dead far enough away that you could pretend they weren't there. But what happens when a railway designed for forgetting becomes impossible to forget? The train reached Brookwood Cemetery in 45 minutes. The coffins were unloaded by station porters who worked exclusively with the dead. Burial plots assigned by ticket class. The mourners returned to London on the 3:15 p.m. service. Brown's ledgers showed profit by the second month. By 1900, the Necropolis Railway was carrying 55,000 bodies per year. The trains had three classes. First class, plush velvet mourning carriages, mahogany coffin compartments, private waiting rooms at Waterloo where widows sipped tea from bone china. Second class, simple wooden benches, shared compartments, coffins visible through glass partitions. Third class, standing room only for mourners, coffins stacked like cargo in converted freight cars. Even in death, Victorian London couldn't let go of its hierarchies. The railway published fare schedules like any commercial line. First class funeral, £2 10 shillings. Third class, 2 shillings 6 pence. You could measure exactly what a life was worth by what its corpse could afford. The station at Waterloo had separate entrances, one draped in black silk for the wealthy, one plain door for the poor. From the 1902 Necropolis Railway ledger, received from estate of Lord Pemberton, £47 8 shillings for private carriage, floral arrangements, and reserved plot. Received from Whitechapel Parish, 3 shillings 6 pence for pauper transit and mass grave allocation. The same trains, the same tracks, different worlds. What does it say about a society that it sorted corpses by wealth? By 1900, the Necropolis Railway was transporting 2,000 bodies a year. Every morning at 11:20, the funeral train departed Waterloo. By 1910, 4,000 corpses annually. The living forgot them before the train even left the platform. Here's what the newspapers didn't print. The railway company lobbied Parliament to restrict funeral processions through London streets, arguing corpse carts caused traffic. They wanted a monopoly on death itself. It almost worked. In 1906, Westminster proposed legislation requiring all burials beyond city limits to use the railway. The bill failed by 17 votes. From MP Thomas Shaw's diary, March 1906, voted against the Necropolis Bill today. Cannot stomach the notion of private profit from public grief. Yet what alternative exists? The living need space. The dead have become a sanitation crisis. London was eating itself, and the dead were in the way. By 1920, Brookwood Cemetery held over 200,000 bodies. The railway had moved a city's worth of corpses, one coffin at a time. And then something changed. Why did funeral train ridership suddenly collapse in 1915? World War I. That's the answer. Young men were dying in Flanders faster than the railway could transport them home. Families couldn't afford elaborate funerals when they were burying sons in mass graves across France. The Necropolis Railway ridership dropped 60% between 1914 and 1918. But something else happened, something the company records tried to bury. The government requisitioned the funeral trains, not for corpses, for ammunition.
Those same carriages that carried duchesses in coffins now carried artillery shells to Southampton docks. The railway company protested. The War Office paid them triple. From a 1917 railway worker's letter, "We clean the carriages between runs. Coffin dust 1 week, cordite residue the next. The lads joke we're still in the death business, just faster now. Nobody laughs hard." After the war, the trains resumed, but London had changed. The aristocracy was dying out, literally. Estate taxes, economic collapse, social upheaval. The people who could afford first-class funeral trains were vanishing. The railway had built its business on a class system that no longer existed. By 1939, the Necropolis Railway was running at a loss, carrying fewer than 300 bodies a year. And then the bombs came.
April 16, 1941. German bombers targeting Waterloo Station. 3 high-explosive bombs hit the Necropolis Railway terminal at 11:47 p.m. The building collapsed inward. The ornate Victorian facade, the separate waiting rooms, the private mourning chapels, all of it crushed into rubble. No one died. The station was empty. But here's what's strange. After the war, they never rebuilt it. Every other bombed structure at Waterloo was restored. The Necropolis terminal was cleared, paved over, erased. From London County Council minutes, January 1946, proposal to reconstruct Necropolis Railway terminus denied. Land to be repurposed for commercial development. Company assets to be liquidated. The government bought the land for a fraction of its value. The railway company filed objections. They were ignored. By 1947, you couldn't tell a funeral railway had ever existed there. They didn't just demolish a building, they demolished the evidence. Why did London's wealthiest families pay premium fares to send their dead on a train? Because death had become industrial, segregated, profitable. And why did the government erase every record after 1941? Because post-war Britain couldn't afford to remember. It had once sorted corpses by class. The trains stopped running. The dead stayed buried. And London built over its own grave. What else has London paved over that we've agreed to forget? By 1900, the Necropolis Railway carried 2,000 bodies a year. Then, the living stopped riding with them. The third-class mourner carriages, those cramped wooden compartments where widows sat beside their husbands' coffins, went empty. From the London Necropolis Company Annual Report, 1902, mourners increasingly decline accompaniment, preferring private motor conveyance to cemetery gates. The railway persists as freight concern only. The trains became ghost services, coffins without witnesses. Brown's vision of death as communal procession had collapsed into logistics. The company kept running. There was still profit in corpses, but they stopped publishing passenger numbers. What happens to a railway built for grief when grief itself changes shape? By 1915, the mourner carriages were converted to carry ammunition. The dead rode alone now, stacked like cargo, while their families took motor cars along roads the railway was supposed to replace. London had found a way to make even funerals private. April 16, 1941, 11:17 p.m. A German bomber drops a single high-explosive device on Westminster Bridge Road. The London Necropolis station, platform, waiting rooms, the entire Gothic terminus disappears in one concussive moment. No casualties. The station was empty. From the London Necropolis Company emergency correspondence, April 18, 1941, station infrastructure total loss. All records, timetables, and ledgers from 1854 forward destroyed by fire. Company archives irretrievable. Here is what the government did next. Nothing. No rebuild, no restoration. They cleared the rubble and left the land empty. The railway line to Brookwood still existed. The track was intact, but they rerouted funeral trains to a temporary platform a quarter mile away. Why would a profitable railway
company, with 87 years of continuous operation, simply vanish after one bomb, because by 1941, the Necropolis Railway had become an embarrassment, a monument to Victorian death obsession in a city trying to survive modern war. The government let it die.
Today, a small office building sits where Platform 1 used to be. There is no plaque, no historical marker, but the track is still there, buried under asphalt on Westminster Bridge Road. You can see the indent where rails once ran. Brookwood Cemetery still operates. 200,000 bodies rest in those Surrey fields, but the trains stopped in 1941 and never returned. From Sir Richard Brown's private journal, December 1889, archived at Surrey History Center, quote, "I built a railway to dignify death. Instead, I industrialized it. I cannot determine which impulse was truer, the reverence or the efficiency," unquote. What does it mean that we built an entire railroad for corpses, then erased it so completely most Londoners don't know it existed? The answer is this: the Necropolis Railway worked exactly as designed. It solved the problem of too many dead bodies in too small a city by making death invisible. So invisible, we forgot the infrastructure itself. We didn't bury the railway. We buried the truth that death had become a business, that grief had a timetable, that the empire ran on efficiency, even in mourning. Brown stood on that platform in 1854, watching the first funeral train depart. 48 coffins bound for Surrey. He called it progress. Maybe he was right, but he never asked what we'd lose when death disappeared from the streets entirely, when it became something you shipped away on rails, out of sight, scheduled between the milk trains and the morning commute. I would see you on the next one. Subscribe and turn on the notification button.